No one can understand that mysterious thing we call influence, yet every one of us continually exerts it either to heal, to bless, to leave marks of beauty, or to hurt, poison, and stain other lives. That's a quote from J.B. Miller. I've heard lots of things from him. He's got some good stuff, but I actually found it in your notes. I think it's something you shared
Mhm.
several years ago. But we're going to be talking about influence today. So, welcome to Looking Up. This is a podcast for Christian women. My name is Carla Moore. I'm back in Texas, back in 99 degrees in September.
Woo.
And my friend Kathy Pollard is in Bowling Green, Kentucky. We just get together every week. We talk, we chat, we solve the world's problems. We try to. At least we talk about things, right? That's what
Right.
we're doing. We enjoy it every week. So glad and thankful that you've joined us. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We have a YouTube. We record it like this. And we're trying something new today because Laura Davis messaged me and said, would y'all think about maybe doing a side-by-side recording? She was talking about your painting that you showed a couple of weeks ago, I guess, that you when you lifted it up, the camera went back to me, so people only got a little bit of a glimpse of your painting. So she was saying, if y'all did side by side recording, then we could always see both of you at the same time when you show things. So we're trying it. What do you
Mhm.
think?
I think it means we have no way to hide now. Like
We can't like
can't blow your nose or
wipe our nose away off the camera. Yeah, that's
skim
true.
your
I thought
notes to
about that.
remember what you want to say or anything like that. It's all out in the open now.
Yeah.
Now, I thought that was a great suggestion, and hopefully we figured it out. And I think I've got it set up that way, but I'm not sure. We'll find out.
Well, you said yours doesn't look any different, right?
And yeah, the whole setup looks like it always does, but you said yours does look different. So hopefully it worked and
Yeah.
I thought that was a great suggestion, and we always appreciate feedback, and we want this to be as best as it can be, as and good ideas and suggestions and criticisms, anything. We welcome all of that. We just want this to be the very best for our friends listening in that it can be. So we appreciated the suggestion.
I don't enjoy criticism.
I just said that because I was supposed to.
Okay. Yeah. It does kind of look like we're in one in the same room.
Well, I
So
like that.
that's my little tree, but
It looks
that
like a Christmas tree from here.
that is your chest of stuff, your
Mhm.
bookshelf, not bookshelf. Well, bookshelf.
It's a built-in, yeah.
Yeah.
Call it my pantry shelves.
Yeah.
That's
So
how I
what's
use
going
them.
on? Tell us about your Alaska trip.
Well, it's been forever since we talked because we recorded a couple episodes before we left town. So I feel like we have a lot to catch up on. I'll try and condense.
Yeah.
So the highlights, we had a great time in Alaska. The church there is warm and friendly, and you can tell that they appreciate fellowship. We hung around and talked and visited, and they play volleyball. A lot of them do after services. So twice while we were there, Neil and I played volleyball, which was fun, but I am so rusty because I haven't played in a million years. So
Different than pickleball.
yeah, so but that was fun, and we had salmon, that tastes nothing like the salmon that we get here. It's a completely different beast. It is so good. But the Eskews are the people that we communicated with before we ever went up there, Dan and Jennifer Eskew. And have you ever knew that you were going to like somebody before you actually met them in person? That's kind of how we felt about them because the communication was just so great. It was just we were already drawn to them just through the emails that we'd been exchanging back and forth for a few weeks. So getting to meet them in person was not disappointing. It's like you kind of feel like you're going to be friends with them, and we liked them every bit as we thought we would. So it was great to meet them in person and love them and feel like we made new friends, when we left. But let's see, what do I want to share?
Well, let me
Um,
ask you, what time does it get dark there this time of year?
about 9 o'clock, just shy of 9 o'clock. And it seemed like even while we were there, I think I
Mm,
heard somebody say that at this time of year, it gets dark about 5 minutes earlier every single night.
yeah.
So by the time we were there, even it seemed like it was getting dusky, darky a little bit earlier than usual from the first part of our trip. But um, so the views, of course, were incredible. And we even had a lot of rain and overcast days, and it was still beautiful. I can't imagine if it was just all sunshine and blue waters. I can't imagine what that kind of experience would have been, but it is a beautiful state. And carved birch wooden bowls is one of the things that they're kind of known for. And we got to come home with one that was hand carved by one of the members there. So that was pretty special. And we went on a boat tour. So the first few days we were with the congregation doing a Think Souls seminar. And then the last 3 days we did some sightseeing and we went on a boat tour. We went to Seward, Alaska, and did a boat tour of Resurrection Bay and got to see orcas. There was like 5 of them that we got to see. We got to see a couple of sea otters, which were adorable. And one of them was holding an octopus and eating it. You know how they float on their back and their little heads are sticking up with their little paws right there? They're so cute. I didn't get any good pictures of anything. So I didn't. The eels turned out way better than mine, and even then it wasn't great. It's like you can see it from the boat, but you're going on your picture. You see that little freckle right there? That's a sea otter, you know. Um,
Sometimes you just got to enjoy it and not take
you just
pictures of
have to enjoy it. Yeah, it's soak it all into your brain. We saw sea lions, we saw bald eagles. So that was great, even though it was rainy and we ended up getting soaked to the bone because we kept going out to get pictures in the rain. But it was fun. I had Alaskan king crab legs in Alaska. So that was a highlight for me. We went to this restaurant called Ray's in Seward, which is on the dock. And while we were eating, there was a rainbow right out our window. So it was like the perfect little scene. So those are all the highlights. The not so great things was the fact that it rained the whole time we were
it.
there. And we spent a lot of time being drenched and cold, you know, and still a beautiful state, but um, it'd be nice to go back when I wasn't freezing. So
That would be in June for about a week, maybe.
yeah, probably. So I felt like everything that I was sharing made it sound like the most amazing experience. And it was, but there was also a lot of like, it was just rainy and overcast and, there were certain things that we had hoped to see that we didn't because of the weather, and that's fine. But anyway, I didn't want anybody to think it was like the most amazing, perfect trip.
Did you go up to Exit Glacier?
Yes, we did. We hiked it. Um, I was telling you a little bit on the front end, our little fear of bears,
Oh,
because we found out that all the advertisements for bear spray when we first got there, we thought was kind of a tourist trap. And we
yeah.
thought, Psh, we're not buying that stuff. But that particular hike, there were moments when there were no people around us. And the ones that we had seen earlier on the hike all had bear spray in their back pocket. And there were moments when we were thinking, I wonder if we should have picked up some bear
Who's the
spray.
smart people now?
Exactly. But we did. We hiked up to Exit Glacier and Neil did some running because he's a runner. For those of you who don't know, it doesn't matter if we're traveling, it doesn't matter if it's snowing and icy outside, he is going to run. And he ran outside in Alaska. But the funny thing is, he beat his own personal records every time. He kept up the
Called
pace.
motivation.
He was definitely motivated. He just kind
Mhm.
of like freaked himself out a little bit, thinking, I don't want a bear coming after me. So he was booking it and broke his own record the first time, broke that broken record the second time. So he
Did he
just,
ever like think that there was a bear around him, or was he just like
no, there was never a
lethargic?
moment when he actually had like sighted anything or heard anything. It was just his mind. And you had shared a little news clipping with us about a runner where we were who got mauled by a bear. So that was going through his mind.
And it's not just bear, but moose. I mean,
Yeah,
moose can do a
apparently
lot of damage too.
there's these signs everywhere on the road even that say moose crash. I guess
Hmm.
that's where places that they can happen. And there were signs like moose spotted here. And another interesting sign we kept seeing was fish viewing. And we thought, that is so strange. And finally, we just decided we'd go ahead and pull over and see what it's all about. Well, it's where you can walk out to the big streams and creeks and things. And there are so many salmon that you can just see them. I mean, there are just tons of them, and you can see them swimming upstream. And so we thought, oh, that's what that's all about. That's worth looking at. So It's amazing how different it is, just the way things are, the way things look, the things that they experience that are so foreign to, here, like with the bears and moose and salmon and things like that. But I kept thinking we were visiting another country because you have to sit on a plane for so long to get there, but no. They're
I
not
mean,
another
it's
country.
a state separated from our country by another country, but
Yeah.
it does feel, I mean, I remember thinking it has everything. Like it has, we went clamming one time with Alice's daughter and her son-in-law, and it was in the summer and the tide had gone out. So there's this big wide expanse of mud, basically sand. And we're standing there in the ocean, basically, and there's a mountain right across from us. The sun is up, it was probably super early in the morning and bright sunlight. And I was thinking, they have everything here. They have the beach, they have the ocean, they have the mountains, they have warmth and sunshine, they have snow, I mean, it's just the total package of everything, along with wild animals that will kill you if they get the chance to.
Yes.
Did you see any eagles?
We did. We saw bald eagles, and they're everywhere. I only spotted them once while we were there, but I know that Neil saw them more than that. He spent more time out in the bow of the ship than I did, because it was raining
And cold, I'm sure.
and cold. Yeah, but we bought those frog togs,
Mhm.
the outerwear stuff based on some good advice that we were given after we got there, and we were so grateful that we did. But we only wore the top. It comes with tops and bottoms. We only wore the top because we thought that's all we needed and instantly regretted not wearing the bottoms also because we were soaked through and through.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad y'all got to do that. It's an experience for sure. And my utmost respect to people that live there
Mhm.
because it's not an easy place to live. I mean, it's beautiful in the summertime,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
who wants to be there I mean, you could be there from like what, the middle of May to the end of June, and then the rest of the time you're you're cold and wet and dark and
Yeah. Well, another interesting thing to me was the mountain colors looked red and green and yellow. And I kept trying to figure out what I'm seeing. It just what kind of green? Because they had the rocky, snowy tops, and then like once you got down to the vegetation, it was this vivid red and vivid green, and it didn't look like fall foliage. It looked like something growing on the side of the mountain. And I never did figure out what it was, but I was trying to picture that from the view of like, say, watercoloring, something like that. It would never dawn on me to use those colors in a painting of the mountains, but that's what was on the mountains. It was just absolutely gorgeous. And I still don't know what it is. Some kind of something. I looked it up, and I'm not sure that's what it was, but something was saying that they have a lot of blueberries bushes out there that grow low and they turn red that time of year. The leaves turn red that time of year. And then there was something else. I don't know if it was the fireweed that I've heard about or what, but it was really pretty and just kind of unexpected. Never seen anything like that before. And another interesting thing that happened was we were in Soldotna with that congregation there, but as we were getting ready to leave, Robbie Fudge, who lives in Glasgow, Kentucky, just, like half an hour from us, um, he serves as one of the elders where my mom worships, Mom and Ray. And he was up there in Anchorage at the Anchorage Church of Christ doing a singing seminar. And so we made sure to go and visit them on Wednesday night, which was the start. They had just gotten there. It was the start of theirs. So when we walked in the door, it was so wild to go. They only live half an hour from us and we never see them. So we went
you have
all
to
the way to
go
Alaska
hours.
and we
Yeah.
got to see them. Yeah. So thought that was quite a coincidence.
That's funny too. There was somebody I was in communication with. He's someone that's going to be on our October tour, and he was when y'all were there, was on his way up to Wasilla, and they were doing a grief seminar there. So lots of people go up there in the summertime. I would like to experience like one day in the wintertime there just to see.
Mhm.
I don't think I could live there. I have too much. I need light, and
Yeah.
it's that's a like I said, respect for people that live there year round for sure.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. But it's a beautiful state and we enjoyed it. And
Yeah.
especially being with the Christians up there, it was great.
Yep.
Oh,
Well, that it was this week was Alice's funeral this past
mm,
Saturday, and Seward is where she grew up. She was, I think, 6 or so when they moved there from California. So
okay.
when you sent a picture of that of the bay in Seward, I knew exactly where you were standing, and just a lot of the things that you were saying reminded me of
Mhm.
of a lot of things that I've heard from her. But the funeral was nice. John was he was in charge of the service, and all of the family, we had them over on Friday night, and because John likes to like talk with the family to kind of get he knew Alice well, but just wanted to hear from them things that they would like to be highlighted in her service, and got to meet her brother Frank and her cousin that I've always heard her talk about, and her brother when he walked in the door. I know I told you ahead before we started recording, but it almost took my breath away because he had her eyes, and there's just something about his voice that was like her voice. But it was a good healing time, that we could celebrate her life. But it was fun seeing your pictures, knowing that you were seeing a lot of the places that she grew up with. So
Mhm.
anyway, I'm thankful for that. Funerals are hard.
They are.
Don't ever
Yeah.
look forward to it, but when it's
Right.
over, you are so thankful that you've had that time to sit with other people that love that person like you did. And I was just thinking when people were walking in, I took mom, so I was kind of standing in the foyer behind her within her wheelchair. So I was just watching all these people walk in, and people from my past, because when Paul and Alice came to Dripping Springs, it was, let's say, 2002. And so there's a lot of people that knew her same time we got to know her, and it just made me think about heaven too, how it was so good to see those people that I don't see very often, but how much more wonderful heaven will be because those people will be there, and we want everyone to be there with us. So, and that's kind of what we're trying to do with our podcast, encourage people in
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
way.
It's interesting how you go through difficulties and pain. I was thinking about you and the service and the loss and your friendship with her, and it's interesting to me that even in a situation like that, we're shedding tears and thinking about memories that y'all had together and experiences, the location of Seward. You have those memories now in your brain, but how moments like that do make us do exactly what you said. They make us long for heaven and kind of shift our focus, like reset it, if that makes sense. How easy it is just caught up in the day to day responsibilities and obligations and schedules and all that kind of stuff. And something like that comes along and it's painful, but at the same time, you can see how it reshifts our focus and reminds us what's really important and where we want to go and why.
Yeah. Like brought back to center
Yes.
while we're here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so have you done anything besides Alaska?
Uh,
Aren't you traveling
Probably
again this weekend or
next
soon?
weekend. Next
Okay.
week we're going to Michigan. I did write down some things. Oh, I wanted to mention that there, speaking of loss, a couple of gospel preachers, Earl Edwards and David Sane. We just learned this morning David Sane passed away also. Just great men who loved God and loved his word and had such an impact on the kingdom, on us personally. We learned so much from both of those men. And so I'm praying for their families. And,
Mm.
it's been a week of all kinds of things happening nationwide and in our country, and you can see the fallout from that. It's there's been violence and division and some heartbreaking things that we see. Wish that we didn't have to, but it's there. And I think we as Christians need to think about how we are to respond. Um, Keep falling to our knees in prayer on behalf of everybody involved, and keep showing the love of Christ and keep shining the light, now more than ever. We have the opportunity to do that. And I think when you use the word reset, and I love that, and that makes me think of when you pull up the directions on your phone to something,
Mhm.
when you zoom in and you're trying to see what your next moves are, and there's this one little arrow in the bottom that if you hit it, it puts things right back to where it's supposed to be. That's kind of what I think about with that reset. We kind of get off track and get distracted and what's my next move and blah blah blah. And sometimes you need that reset of, this was awful thing that happened and there's all this fallout and division because of it, but it's a reminder of, again, who we are, why we're here, where we're going, and that we're supposed to be showing others the way and reminding ourselves that to make the most of our time, our brief time here, to, all of this stuff, people lining up behind personalities or philosophies and feelings, and none of that is secure. Only the word of Christ is, and Jesus is the way, and that's why we're here, to hopefully help people see that and to put their focus, line up behind Jesus the King and live in a way in obedience to him. And then, all this fleeting stuff and turmoil in the world is just going to pass away so quickly, and eternity will never end, So I know feelings and thoughts and emotions can run high at a time like this, but it all needs to be guided by the word of God and how we respond. So that's my
Yeah.
little spiel.
Yeah. Well, pulling ourselves back to where we need to be when our feelings are wanting us to be somewhere else. And I remember just being slapped with the realization not all that long ago that the Bible says that the devil is the prince of this world. I remember thinking, wait, the Bible says that something else is the prince of this world, but the devil is the prince of this world. And it's a spiritual battle going on here. And I think that the devil wants to divide us, and he wants to shock us, and he wants to make our feelings what makes us act. How I feel about something is what's going to drive me to do or say something. And we just always have to be drawn back to center and remember that he who is in us is greater than he who is in the world. And that's been hard for me this week in reactions and in feelings and in just having to always remember that God is still in control even when bad things happen, and that it's in the end what is right and what is good is what will happen. And we have to keep doing the next right thing and the next right thing when we don't want to. So, yeah, it's been a hard week. It's been a very hard week.
The quote I shared this morning was from Tamara Alexander. She's actually an author, a Christian fiction author that I read. And so I get her emails. I follow her emails. And she shared those thoughts in her email. And I just pulled it and used it as a quote. And she said, I mean, I don't know exactly what she said, but something along the lines of, a long time ago, a good friend reminded her to spend as much time in the Word as she does taking in everything else. And she used the examples of Netflix, social media, and the news.
Mhm.
Spend as much time in the Word as you do all that other stuff that you're taking in. And she said that she was so glad because it led to an awareness, a conviction, a needed repentance on her part, and made a big difference because every time you turn to the Word, you meet the King there. And I mean, now more than ever, I feel like we've been so conditioned. And obviously, I'm speaking to people who, probably mostly speaking to people who have some kind of social media influence on them. You're seeing things on social media. And I feel like it kind of conditions us to feel like we have to respond somehow. We have notifications. We get to choose if we're going to do a heart or a like or a dislike or a wow, or, we have to respond somehow, and we have to have some kind of camp that we choose. I'm going to respond this way and not like this. Well, I'm going to respond this way and not like, it's coming in at us all the time and affecting us and making us react and respond. And, sometimes we don't know as much as we think we do, and we're only seeing what social media is letting us see. And I mean, there's just so many things that we don't know. And I'm not trying to be vague. I'm just trying to remind us all to spend time in the Word because that much is true and always is. Reliable, true, sure, never changing, has eternal impact. It's what's going to shape our hearts so that we know how to respond. If we respond with the Word, going to the Word and sharing the Word, then we're good. But This reminder is for myself. It's hard not to be shaken by everything that we see out there. I need to spend more time in the Word than I am taking in all this other stuff that's happening all around the world 24/7.
Yeah, well said. I can't even add anything to that. There's nothing truer, nothing more important, nothing that will draw us back to center more than the word will do that. So thank you for that reminder.
Welcome.
So what else was I going to share? I rearranged the living room yesterday.
You did.
Yeah.
Walk us through it.
Well, it's funny because I had kind of that's just the best way for me to clean because I haven't moved the furniture to sweep underneath it, and we have like wood type floors, and it was a little embarrassing what all I found under there. Although I did find a $25 Crumble gift card.
Wow.
Yeah, and I know, well, I thought it was Jake's. It wasn't. So it's either Micah's or Jordan's. But I found some M&Ms. I had a little discussion on Facebook yesterday about whether or not I should eat them because I mean it's chocolate and
I
you can
know.
clean them off. I did not eat them.
I almost commented. I saw that post. I almost commented, wait, you're supposed to move your furniture
Yeah.
to clean?
Anyway, John was in his office. So his office is kind of behind the living room. And I told him I'm going to be vacuuming, so I'm going to shut the hall door. And so I did. And by the time he came out for lunch, I had it all moved. So the brown couch that's usually against the wall is on the other side of the room. And the
Mm.
sectional that has the piece that you can rest your feet on is against that window. I mean, I'll send you a picture of it, but it's always funny when John comes out of his office and he's looking at a paper he's carrying and then he stops and he looks around because he does not like change very much. Although he always likes it once he comes around. It's just the initial impact of, wait a minute, what have you done? Because I moved everything. I mean, I moved the coffee table, I moved the big leather chair, I moved everything and swept and cleaned, and it just feels, I don't know maybe it's that
Nice.
resetting. It just feels good
That's a
because
great feeling. Yeah.
I like to have things tidy and neat and clean, and I just like change.
I do
So
too.
he came around. He said, I like it. It's just, when you're going from the bedroom to the kitchen at night, you have to watch your step because you're not used to the different arrangement. And I
Mm.
also rearranged my office, and I think I finally got to where I like the way it's set up because I've had my desk in one, two, three, four. This is the fourth
Yeah,
arrangement I've
because
had
you
it
have a
in.
different background behind you
Yeah.
now. Hmm.
Yeah. So this way I can see out the window on my left and I can see the TV. If I have the TV on, I can see the door. So I think I finally figured out which way I want it. And it just took me a while. So I'm
Very
a
fun.
rearranger.
Hmm. I like doing that. Neil, not so much.
Yeah.
Usually I get a few sighs if I think, hey, I was thinking.
Well, I just do it myself. And that way I don't have to involve him in it.
Well, I usually ask for his muscle, can you help me move blah, 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 blah. And then I think he sighs because 9 times out of 10, I go,
Don't
"Mm,
like it. Put it back.
let's put it back." Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and unfortunately, in the living room, the TV kind of dictates what you can do with your furniture. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a fact of life because you don't want to have to like look this way at the TV. So,
Mhm.
but I managed to work around that.
Well, I've always heard that you're not supposed to put your furniture up against the walls, because it makes your space look smaller and you're supposed to have them kind of floating in the middle in groupings or whatever. And I keep trying that since that's what you're supposed to do. And I always hate it. I don't like walking around the furniture and it doesn't feel bigger to me. It feels cluttered to me. I like my couch up against the wall.
Well, you have a long, narrow room, so you kind of have to
Yeah.
do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
What else? So John and I this was like 2 weekends ago, but we went to Estes Park. I think I told you that we were going to, but we did. And we went on a hike in Rocky Mountain National Park, and it was really funny. This is just a dumb little thing, but we happened to go to the same hiking trail that we had gone to before, Beaver Meadows, because it's a little bit less elevation. You can walk a long ways without having to climb too much. And
Mhm.
I just happened to take a picture of John in the exact same location I had done like 6 years earlier. And he's actually turned the same way. And you could see the same scenery in front of him, the same turn in the road.
Hmm.
There'd been a fire on the hillside between, so things looked a little bit different there, but it was anyway, we enjoyed it. It just was a little break. We saw elk. We ate Smokin' Dave's barbecue because we like, you know how sometimes there are just little trips that you make that are tradition and you have to follow tradition. So
Yeah.
we did. It was
Did
good.
John look the same?
Did John look the same?
Mhm.
Uh,
Years later?
pretty much.
Mm.
Pretty much. I'll have to send you those photos. Just see
Yeah.
what you think.
Hmm.
So big news. I rearranged the living room and we took a hike.
I did want to ask everybody to remember our daughter-in-law, Emily. She lost her grandfather over the weekend, and she just adored him. And I know she's grieving his loss and be
Did he
thinking
live?
about her. Hmm?
Where did he live?
Georgia.
Okay.
And I think he died on Sunday. I think that's when she told us about it, but I know
Yeah.
they'll be heading down there soon for the funeral. So
Yeah.
probably by the time this airs, they'll be back. I don't know, but
How much of a drive is that?
3 or 4 hours. It's not
Okay.
bad.
Too bad.
Hmm.
With three kids.
Yeah, might feel
So
like longer with 3 kids.
speaking of driving, Jordan and Micah are both in Colorado right now, like southwestern Colorado hunting, elk hunting. And Jordan left Wednesday before, well, a week ago today, he left. And because today is Wednesday, the 17th. And then Micah came to the funeral on Saturday and he left from the funeral and was driving that entire way by himself, which, as a mother, I can't help but worry about him a little bit. And I said something to Jake about it, and he goes, Mom, he's got two little kids, 14 hours in the car with no kids. That's like a little piece of heaven.
Yeah.
And I also said to him, I said to Micah, that you're sleeping at like 10,000, 11,000 feet elevation. You're probably not going to get very good sleep because I can't sleep at elevation. He said, and he too said, Mom, I haven't slept for 10 months because Sophie doesn't sleep well. So I'm going to sleep better on this trip than I've slept in a year.
Ah, do you miss those days?
Do not miss that. I don't miss the sleep part and the car part.
Yeah, we're thinking about that with all of our little grands, watching our kids not sleeping, and trying to be sympathetic, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, we put in our time. We remember.
I sent Aaron a little reel the other day where, it's someone acting, but the mom is in the front seat driving and the kid's in the back and she's like trying to reach back there and whack him and he's pulling legs doing this and every which way she tries to whack him, he's moving and getting away from her. And I think she keeps in the car a spanking spoon and
Oh,
she can poke him with that when they need poking. No, I don't miss
gee.
those days.
Yeah. Oh, well, I
Okay,
think that's all I have.
that's all I got too.
Mhm.
All right, so are we ready to get started?
Yes.
I want to read that quote again because we're going to talk about influence.
Mhm.
And that quote from J.B. Miller again says, no one can understand that mysterious thing we call influence, yet every one of us continually exerts it, either to heal, to bless, to leave marks of beauty, or to hurt, poison, and stain other lives. And you shared this, and I reposted it at some point in the past. And I asked the question, am I helping to heal you or am I poisoning you? And when you use that word poison,
Mhm.
it sounds pretty serious, but our influence really can poison someone. And I wanted us to just talk about different ways that we influence and how intentional comes up every week. It seems like we talk about being intentional. And I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about intentional influence, but I really wanted to focus in on unintentional influence because that I think is something we don't think about as much and how regardless of whether we're thinking about it or not, we're influencing someone. And it's usually if we're not thinking about it, if we are not the kind of person we need to be, if we're not really trying to be like the Lord, if we're not cautious in the way that we deal with people, then we're influencing most likely in a bad way. So, influence. Can you think of people in your past who have influenced you in a big way? And you don't, don't tell us their names necessarily unless you want to, but who has influenced you in your past?
Yeah, and I always, well, what makes me, the first thing that comes to mind is it's always somebody that I wouldn't expect. Isn't that kind of funny how when you think about who's influenced you, it's not like you pick somebody,
Mhm.
okay, I choose this person and they're going to influence me. It doesn't work that way. And when I look back through the years, I always think about different stages, as a
Mhm.
newlywed, as a young mom, all these different stages. And I can think about certain individuals that had a huge influence on my life and an impact. It's not like I knew that was going to happen. They just ended up being a part of my life because they cared enough to and cared enough to speak up or say something or step in or lend a hand or I just saw them in action in a certain situation that they were going through or whatever it is. And so thinking about all these different individuals through the years, there have been people that God has put in our life wherever we've been and however old we are. Now here I can think of individuals who have such a huge influence over us, and I'm so grateful for them. And I think that's one of those special blessings of, when you think about being the recipient of the influence, if that's what you're talking about right now, that God puts in your life without you even knowing that He's at work in the moment to do that. The intentional part comes when we're thinking about how we influence others, but what a blessing it is when you look back through all the years and you see the individuals that God placed probably unexpectedly, and you're just the right moment, just the right time. And I look back and I remember learning about um, marriage and parenting and teenhood and
Mhm.
being a grandparent, even, respect for in-laws. I can think of individuals that through their example left a big impact on me in all of those ways.
Yeah. Yeah. You can think of specific individuals.
Yes,
Yeah.
specific individuals.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can too. And I was trying to think of, specifically, and my mind went good and bad ways, influenced us or influenced me in good ways and bad ways. And one of the things that I thought about was when I was 8, we moved to San Marcos, Texas, so that Dad could be the director of the Bible chair on campus at Southwest Texas State University at a place called McCarty. McCarty Student Center was the name of the building, and it was basically, where the church operated on campus, even though I'm not saying it right, but I think most people know a Bible chair. Dad taught classes for Texas State, but so from the time that I was 8 until I was 18, and when I was 18, I got married, and John did the same job that Dad did, but I was around all of those students that came to a college campus and were involved in the church work on the college campus. And of course, there were some that were very, very strong and some that were kind of more on the fringe. And I was too young to really notice too much of that. But I had that continual influence on my life from those older, when I look at them now, an 18-year-old college kid is a kid. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that they're still very young to me now. But when I was 8, 10, 12, an 18-year-old was a big deal. And the
Mhm.
fact that they paid attention to me, that they liked me, that they didn't mind that I hung around them. I'm probably talking more about it than I should, but when I think of my preteen and teen years, those college students at McCarty Student Center had a huge, huge influence on me. And in some ways, because I wasn't really interested in what was going on at the junior high or the high school when I was in junior high and high school, because I'd rather be with these Christians, and maybe in some ways there was maybe a little bit of negative associated with that I was, should have been more engaged with my own age. But at the same time, I think I'm just so thankful for that. So I think of McCarty students, and I could name names like Jamie and Glenda DeLong, Mike and Brenda Ratcliffe. And I mean, there was just Steve Dykes and his wife Jan, so many of them that I still keep in touch with because they had a huge influence on me when I was a young girl. And I thought also of someone who was an enormous influence on me as a young mom and a good person. But I think I've mentioned her before in different podcasts. She had so much of an influence on me that I feel like I had blinders on almost. And her way of parenting was very different.
Mm.
And she tended to be a little bit more I don't want to say critical because that has a negative connotation, but she almost had so much influence on me that I couldn't think for myself. And it
Mm.
was not until later that, we had, for different reasons, had gone our separate ways. We still maintained relationship, but not as much, that it was like I could shake my head and go, wait a minute, why am I doing it this way? It was it was such an influence that I couldn't think for myself. And so I think that there's times that we have to be careful not to let someone completely cloud our thinking, whether it's even if it's in a good way, because I think she had mostly a good influence on me, but you need to think for yourself too. So, other than my parents and John, I think of those people that had so much influence on me, and I'm grateful for that. But um, I think that there's a lot of people that have had negative influence on us as well, and probably didn't even know it. Anyway, unless you have something else you want to say about that, I'm going to move
Oh, go
on.
ahead.
So the definition of influence is the ability to produce an effect without apparent force or direct authority. So you're producing an effect in someone without making them realize that you're producing an effect in them. It's
Here I
kind
am to influence you.
yeah, yeah. And sometimes it would be good if we really thought about it like that. Um, Thinking about what the Bible has to say about influence, several different passages came to mind, and you probably have other ones too. 1 Corinthians 15:33, do not, almost said, do not be conceived. Do not be deceived, because bad or evil company will ruin your good morals. We've all heard that since we were kids. Matthew 5:13 through 16 talks about you're the salt of the earth, you're the light of the world. And, if the salt has gone bad, how are you impacting it? You have no influence. And so it's worth nothing. And then it goes on and talks about a city set on a hill, you can't be hid. So let your light shine. Proverbs 27:17 says that iron sharpens iron. And so one man or woman sharpens the countenance of his friend. And when you think about that, am I the kind of person that sharpens you, or do I dull you? And thinking about our own influence on others, what am I doing in my own life to make me the kind of person that helps someone, that draws them to God, that makes them a better person? Or are you the kind of person that basically you're good for nothing except spreading gossip, or influencing someone to do something they shouldn't do? So, be sharpening iron. Then there's Galatians 5:7 through 9 that talks about how a little leaven leavens the whole lump. And you know more about yeast and leaven than I do, but it doesn't take much, right, to make a whole lump of dough rise. But what happens if it's not any good? It doesn't have any effect. It doesn't work. Uh,
Mhm.
And then 1 Timothy 4:12 Paul's talking to Timothy, let no one despise your youth, but show yourself an example. So he's talking about intentionally making sure that you don't give anyone any reason to, and I think this can apply when we're older. Don't let anyone look down on any part of you. Make sure that you're the kind of person that you need to be that draws others to Christ. And then one other, Hebrews 10:24 and 25, let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good works. And uh, goes on to say that we should be encouraging one another more and more as we see the day approaching. So those are the ones that I came up with, and I know there's lots more if there's some that you want to share.
Well, the with the First Timothy one, I went a few verses later, First Timothy 4:15, because Timothy was influenced by his mother and his grandmother. The faith that was first in his grandmother Lois, and then his mother Eunice. And I was thinking about how Paul's talking to Timothy about that, but Paul himself is also influencing Timothy. And he says, he was encouraging Timothy about his gifts. And he said in verse 15, 1 Timothy 4:15, I think he mentioned verse 12. In verse 15, he said, practice these things, immerse yourself in them so that all may see your progress. And the NIV says, be diligent in these matters, give yourself wholly to them so that everyone may see your progress. So Paul was encouraging or influencing Timothy, but then he wanted Timothy to do something with it so that he could then influence others for good. And when I was thinking about the types of things that he was talking about, it made me wonder all those people that you mentioned, that you were influenced by, and you asked me, can I think about people in my life that had influenced me? I was influenced by what they did more than what they said.
Yeah.
We do a lot of swaying one way or another with our speech, but when I think about people that have genuinely made an impact on my life, it's things that I saw them doing with their life, how they were living and acting and behaving. And that's what Paul is telling Timothy, and practice these things so that others can see them and see your progress. And our influence it's so much more than what we say. It's how we live, and that's what's going to make an impact on others.
Yeah. What is that saying? I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because we are more affected by, because that's more real. When you
Mm-hmm.
see someone actually do something, you can say things all day long and not really mean it, and not do things about it, do anything about it.
Yeah.
Um, as far as influence on our kids, I think back to especially when they were preteens and teenagers, and how we were pretty intentional about who our boys spent time with. And obviously, there were times that they were not around us and they made choices to who they were around and who influenced them. But as far as what we could control, we made sure that there were mentors that, you can kind of watch and see who your child is drawn to. An older person, maybe when like those for me that were college students when I was in middle and high school. I think there are so many that I look back on when our boys were that age, and maybe they were 3 or 4 years older, and we could observe their behavior and observe their character, and we would ask them to come have dinner with us, or, would you mind taking him to get a Coke or something, and try to manufacture those situations where they could mentor and have influence on them. So I think that we can be intentional about who influences our kids. Are there people that when Neil's around them make him a better person? You like him more? I think
Yeah.
there are lots of people like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've heard you say something similar to me before, and I'd never even thought about that really, like put it into words, but I can definitely see couples that we've hung out with. And that influence can go both ways, and I feel that too. There are people that we can hang out with that I feel like brings out the best in us, and then people that we can hang out that
Don't.
bring out the best in us because we get caught up in the gossip or the griping or, whatever it might be. We allow that. I'm not putting the blame on them. We allow that. But yeah, I can see and it makes me wonder how much of that I'm not even aware of. Maybe Neil can see that if I'm around certain people, they don't necessarily bring out the best in me, and they don't bring out any kind of sweet wifiness or anything
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. Well, surrounding ourselves with Christians and people who are like-minded,
Mhm.
and not just someone that's a Christian, but that someone has the same values and the same um, desire to be a positive person and to encourage. I mean, it just makes all the difference in the world when you have someone that is walking by your side in life. And I'm not talking about a spouse, but friends who encourage you and influence you to do the good things. So I was just thinking intentionally, when we're trying to be our best selves, in that passage, it talks about how that we are to consider how to stir one another up, spur one another on. I looked at the different translations, provoke one another. And I think of provoking as being a bad thing, but it's not necessarily if
Mhm.
you're provoking someone to do something that's good. And we intentionally do that, maybe when when you're walking into the church building on Sunday, and this is the person I want to be, and this is who I present, I put my best foot forward. Maybe we're teaching a class, a Bible class, and that's an intentional effort to be an influence by using our words and having studied the word, and so putting that out there, we're wanting to influence people. Maybe even social media, if we determine that we want to use it instead of it using us. And sometimes we put those highlight reels out there and not necessarily the reality, although I'm not a big fan of just barfing everything up about your life. You don't have to do that. You're not a fan of that either.
Yeah.
And then, I was also, it hadn't even dawned on me when I started thinking about talking about influence, but that term now that we hear so much about, influencers. And I mean, those are people that make money off of influencing others to buy something or to decorate a certain way or to, a certain look that they have. And I started kind of wondering about influencers that I follow, and I could only find one or two like home decor people. But I don't know. What's your opinion about influencers? Do you have
I
one?
think, well, I think it's a new business opportunity. You know, times are always changing and there's all these business and job opportunities online. And I think it's pretty harmless if it's something like lifestyle, beauty, and all that kind of stuff. Now, if we are spending all of our time online and that's who's influencing our heart and soul, then that's our problem. Just like I mentioned in the beginning, we need to counter all of our online influences by spending time in the Word, spending time around real people, God's people, spending time around people that we're trying to influence ourselves with the light.
Mhm.
Um, so I think if it becomes consuming into where that's our greatest source of influence, then that's not good. That's out of balance. And then I like the way you put it, use social media for good instead of letting it use us.
Mhm. Well, I think I have seen this anyway. We can get so caught up in the lives of an influencer that you almost feel like you know them. And,
Mhm.
anything that they do and anything that they say, we think is a good thing and we want to be like them. And I think we just have to, ground ourselves in truth and reality and realize that, a lot of these influencers are being paid to share something, a product that they were given and then are being paid to say, this is a great product.
Yeah.
So, anyway, influencers are people who are intending to influence you one way or another, whether it's how to decorate your home, what to carry, your purse that you carry, stuff like that. But I wanted us to spend the rest of the time talking about an intentional influence, and um, unintentional meaning that we do it without realizing that we're doing it. So how many times are we influenced, or how many times do we influence other people without realizing that that's what we're doing?
Mhm.
And so I was trying to think of ways that I have been influenced recently without realizing that that was happening. And one of the good ways, you'll laugh at this because some of these are things that you've been telling me for a while, but I had a conversation with Katrina Steersman at the extension retreat a few weeks ago. And she's a pharmacist. So I was just asking her opinion about like vitamins and things. And I've done this with Shannon Ketchum too, because she's a pharmacist. And so Katrina was telling me that she takes a probiotic every day. And I've never done that. And I know that they're good. I think you can get some probiotics with your food, obviously, which is the best way, but like yogurts and things like that. But she said that she thinks that those are very helpful. And also, she started talking about magnesium glycinate. So the doctors have prescribed magnesium for John for his heart because it has something, it's one of those. What is magnesium? It's not a vitamin,
Amen.
mineral? It's a mineral.
I think so.
But I didn't, they just said give him X number of milligrams of magnesium, but didn't talk about the different kinds of magnesium. Some help with your digestion, some help with rest, some help with heart. And, I just didn't have a lot of guidance with that. So she told me about the different kinds of magnesiums, and then chia seeds. I know you've talked about chia seeds. She says she puts them in things. And so I've started putting chia seeds in my oatmeal banana
Look
thing
at
every day. And then I've started taking a probiotic and I'm paying more attention to magnesium. So, something as it's not silly because, things that we ingest are serious, but I know Katrina wasn't intending to influence me that way. I was asking her about it, but it wasn't just her, but things that I've heard you say. And so now, I'm trying to be a little bit more conscious about that kind of thing. Another way I've been influenced is I always bring this up, but mommy markdown stuff. And I have realized
that.
this is telling about me, but I have realized that a lot of times the way that they word things, she'll say, "Oh wow, this is back on drop." And I'm like, "Oh wow, this must be a big deal." Or she'll say, "It's a lightning deal, so you gotta hurry, hurry."
This one won't
And
last long.
right, yeah, these look amazing, or I have this and I love it. And I think, well, she must know what she's talking about. Let me hurry and purchase this thing. And then I realize those are words. I don't mean that she's being disingenuous, but these are words that we use
Mhm.
to encourage and hurry people along and try to make them buy something or whether or not it really is true. So I'm being a little more conscious of not being swayed by the words, "Oh wow."
Mhm. Especially since I just bought a pair of slippers that she oh wowed.
Uh-huh.
They're horrible.
Yeah.
They showed up, I mean, it was a good deal, apparently. And they showed up and they weren't even in a box. They had like a one strap of saran wrap
Yeah.
holding them together like this. And they're awful. They're clunky. They are not comfortable. I'm like,
Can you return them?
probably. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, she's trying to make money. I'm sure she makes a ton of money off of the things that she shares on there. And so I've just like so often in other areas where we have been influenced, your eyes are open. You're like, oh, maybe I need to pay a little more attention to this. What about what we're reading currently? I mean, the things that I'm reading are almost always recommendations from other people.
Mhm.
So someone's had influence over me with what I'm reading. Maybe there's someone that's uh, involved in some activity or whatever that I think, whether it's like, a certain kind of yoga or whatever, and they influence us. And I don't mean that in any bad way, but I was just trying to think of different ways that we are influenced without even really realizing that we've been influenced.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Yeah,
there's
it's sneaky.
a lot.
It's pretty packaging and choicely worded things, and we just buy into it hook, line, and sinker, and we think it was our idea.
Yeah.
Because I went looking for this, and I just happened to find this, and so now I'm going to buy it. No, none of that's true.
And look, it's an oh wow, and I have to hurry because it's a
Yeah,
light deal and it's
you
going to
were
sell out.
lured in,
Yeah.
swallowed it hook, line, and sinker, and
And it's a
completely
little
influenced.
embarrassing sometimes when
Yeah.
you realize you've been so heavily influenced and it's like that friend. And even though I don't, it wasn't a terrible thing at all, but there are times that you feel like your eyes have just like the film has just been taken off of your eyes and you're seeing things truly for the first time sometimes. And it's a little embarrassing how easily we can be influenced. So what things do we need to pay attention to and what areas of our life? And of course, the very first one that came to my mind was how we are as parents. And it's just such a huge part of our lives, but what do parents do and say that influences their children that it's like, of course you have this one area where I'm going to make sure that my child attends worship. I'm going to make sure that they hear us pray every day. I'm going to make sure that they, do their Bible class lesson, know their memory verse, all of these things that we are intentional about. But what is it that unintentionally, how do we affect them? And I read something that said, a person that said, we are unintentionally shaped by the storyline we inhabit, talking about parents.
Hmm.
We are unintentionally shaped by the storyline that we inhabit. So we give our kids a storyline. And the way I thought of it, it's like this operating system that's going on in our bodies or in our mind and our hearts that we've put there in our kids and haven't even really thought about it.
Mhm.
Like, do we make sure that they know how much they're worth to God? And I think probably we think we are because we're taking them to worship. We're making sure they memorize their Bible class lesson, all of these things that we're assuming that because of those things, they understand how much they're worth to God.
Mhm.
But I don't know that we are really communicating that. Maybe we might even be communicating the opposite. If you don't do these things, then God is not going to love you. That kind of, what is it that we're communicating? Maybe our purpose in life. What is it that we are unintentionally communicating or influencing our kids about their purpose in life? So I don't know if you have anything that you want to add to that.
I just want to add, a lot of times we put disclaimers out there if we talk about marriage or parenting. We're not trying to say that we have this all figured out but in a situation like this, you and I do have the benefit of being able to look back,
Mhm.
having gone through bringing up children in the home and being able to look back. And what I'm thinking about has nothing to do with how good of a job we did at parenting, how stinky we were, or how great we were. It has nothing to do with that. But what we do have is the perspective of our grown children.
Mhm.
Because I'm sure you too have your grown children say things like, I remember how you and dad always blah, blah, blah. And as parents, I feel like there were certain things that we definitely tried to be intentionally influential about.
Mhm.
That was very important to us, and we wanted to make sure this foundation was laid and this was taught, and we were very careful about this. But it always amazes me how many things they bring up, and I'm going, huh?
Yeah.
You know, I don't even remember that.
Yeah.
I don't think you're remembering that correctly. I don't think
You're
I said that. Or
misremembering.
you're misremembering. Yeah, but there are things that they bring up every now and then that influence them that I didn't realize we were doing. I didn't really, good and bad, that I didn't realize we were influencing. And so to me, that's that. And you're talking about as parents, be careful, be intentional about it and what you're influencing your children in the home. And because we're on the other side of that now, and we can see that it is so true. They are being influenced. It's not a decision we make. The decision we do get to make is how they're going to be influenced, how we influence them. And they're going to be influenced by things in the world and things that they're exposed to. We only have control over the home environment. We can't protect them from all that other stuff, mostly. So we can be intentional and mindful of how we're influencing the home and what they're carrying with them when they leave and go off and start their own families. So I think that's why I hope that young moms, young future married people or moms or whatever will be mindful of that because it goes by quickly and kids are watching and listening and paying attention and nobody's expecting any parent to be perfect, but they do have things that lodge themselves into their heart and then they're there forever.
Well, thinking about the intentional, unintentional, one of the things that came to my mind is that John every day would tell the boys, be a leader. He would drop them off at school, and as they got out of the car, he would say, be a leader. So that's, being intentional about things that he said. But what was unintentional was that they watched him be a leader
Mhm.
in situations throughout their entire life that showed them. It was one thing for him to say it, but then they watched him do it. And that was an intentional influence. And I was thinking about how we react to challenges. They see that. And in the home, we're not always 100% on guard. We're at home, so we are relaxed and we feel the feelings and we react to reactions, and there's just all kinds of things that come out in us. And I'm not saying that we can't be at home, but I think that that's part of transforming our minds and making them like God as much as we can, so that when those reactions do come out in us, they're godly reactions and not ungodly ones. Like, if someone gets fired, I think there's lots of preachers out there who have been let go for whatever reason.
Mhm.
How did they handle it in front of their kids? Did
Mhm.
they
Oh yeah.
trash the brotherhood? Did they trash the eldership? Did they just say things that they wouldn't want repeated to other people? How did they handle that? That speaks volumes more so than the parents saying, well, we got fired and we're just going to find a new place to go. It's going to be okay. They're watching and they're seeing how we react to that.
Yeah, good
Trauma,
example.
what
Mhm.
about trauma
Mhm.
of any kind? And I think we overuse that word, but still we encounter trauma and we're going to say that we're going to handle it the best way we know how. We're going to say, I'm going to try to honor God in how I react to this hurtful thing. But they see it. They see how we handle painful things in life and we're influencing our kids no matter what age they are. They might be little and they just feel that things are not right at home. They might be middle schoolers and they are quietly watching. We had one of our boys was a quiet watcher and observer. He would be in the back seat while John and I would be talking about something. He wouldn't say anything, but the next day, something would come out of his mouth about what we were talking about because we thought he wasn't listening. And then we had another one that was like, "What'd you say? Who? What? What happened? I didn't what?" And then we knew, we need to save this for the two of us at a later time. So, they just absorb things like that.
Mhm.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I was
What
thinking
about
back to the intentional and unintentional. With when we were first married, I had a friend, Shelley Holder. She was very intentional with her influence over me. And she would say, let me show you how to fold a fitted sheet. Let me show you what I use to clean up my bathtub. Let me show you, she knew I was young and a young mom and trying to figure all this stuff out. And she would always just say, let me show you this. Let me show you how to do this. Come, she would have me into her home and show me things. And it was really helpful and it was very intentional. And I, definitely needed it. But then I had some that I think about Cheryl Turner, who she was a grandparent long before I ever became a grandparent, but she influenced me in grandparenting. And I remember literally having the thought, I'm filing this away for when I become a grandmother one day, which in my mind was a bazillion years down the road. I'm filing this away because she has such a great relationship with these kids. Or she had to move her mother-in-law in with them and was taking care of her for about 3.5 years. And I remember thinking, I'm filing this away for whenever this happens because she is handling this in such a beautiful, servant-hearted way. And I don't know if ever be in this position, but I'm filing this away. And I was thinking about how, sometimes in the moment, especially with kids, your own children in your home, you know that you're the person they're looking to and you're trying to intentionally influence them. But we're probably not aware of the other people that don't even have kids yet that are watching how we parent.
Mhm.
It's not just our own families that we're trying to influence or affect. It's other people watching that might be going, I'm filing this away for whenever I have kids. And that could go either way. That could be because I want to have that kind of relationship with because I am not going to do that with my kids. People might file away our example for good or ill. But we don't need to discount I guess what I'm trying to say, this fear of our influence. It's not just people who are in the same stage as we are. And so we know they're watching how we blah, blah, blah. It's people that could be, you know, 10 years behind us and they're not in this situation yet. They're not in this phase yet, but they're still being influenced and filing some things away.
And it's interesting too. I was just thinking how Cheryl's influence on you has influenced me because I remember you and I first having that conversation on a treadmill in Denver. I don't remember why we were talking about it, but I remember you talking about Cheryl saying that a grandmother should always be a soft place to land. And
Yep.
that struck me in the heart. And I thought, and that was, I mean, Jackson was probably 2 at the time.
Mhm.
And I've never forgotten that. And I think that's kind of one of those goals for me is to be that kind of grandparent. Not
You said
necessarily,
that to me in 2010 because I still remember where we were and the occasion of the remark, and it has been with me this whole time.
yeah. So her influence on you has influenced me. So think about the ripple effect
Wow.
of influences. And I've
Oh,
said that to other people too. Um, so
how about
yeah,
that?
unintentional. We maybe not don't know how we're influencing others, but it happens. So as far as parenting, reacting to challenges, people, our kids are watching and seeing, what about our attitude towards people, members of the church? And I think that this spills over if we have a lack of respect for someone for whatever reason. Maybe we don't think that they handled a certain situation correctly, and we say something about it in front of our kids or to our kids, and then our kids now have a negative impression of that person. That wasn't an intentional thing that we did, but they heard it and they saw it, and now they're seeing someone else through a different lens than they had before, and they don't need that.
Mhm.
So we sometimes put things out there that we don't intend, maybe because we are being too casual with our relationship with our kids. I don't know what it is. Maybe we let our guard down. We say things that we really shouldn't say because we're thinking things we really shouldn't think. We're not thinking charitably towards someone. And so now our kids have an impression of someone that they really don't need to have. So that's happened more times than, and I'm sure we've done it to our kids. I think, I don't know if the right way to say this. Do we trust our kids too much with too much information because
Yeah.
maybe they're mature, and it still is painful because they are thinking things about people that they don't need to know, they don't need to think. So
Well, especially when um, you grow through that and mature through that and work on that and move on, but your kids may not know that, and all they're left with is the gnarly side of it.
yeah,
That happened in our family, with me being disappointed by a loved one and having a rough time and handling it in not a good way. And probably saying things I didn't need to say and responding in ways I didn't, and years and years and years and years go by and I hear something from one of my sons and I'm just like, where did that come from? And it's because all they have is that one representation
yeah,
and how it hurt me and I cried and the things that I said and they carried that all this time. I hadn't.
yeah,
I had worked through that, I grew through that, I moved on, I changed the relation, I mean like hadn't even given it another thought and certainly didn't have the same kind of relationship with the offender, if you will. But because my child had witnessed it and they were protective and their heart hurt because of the way I was responding in my hurt, that's what they were left with.
yeah,
And that's heartbreaking. I never should have. We're going to be in pain and we're going to cry and things are going to happen and things are going to hurt, but we need to be so careful
yeah,
about how we handle that pain. I should have been careful with what I said about that person, about the situation, and had no idea it was lodging itself into my son's heart. And it
mhm.
just took residence there, and that person in their mind was like X'd out forever.
Yeah, because they hurt their mom.
Yes.
That's such a good point because they don't have all the context. They don't have the maturity to deal with it. And all they know is that the person that they love the most in the world is hurt. And we don't balance that out with truth. We're just reacting with our feelings, which just trickles down. So that's a
Well,
great,
and I think that I should have, if I had known, I probably could have had an opportunity to do damage control. It's not that in a weak moment we say something we shouldn't or act in a way we shouldn't. We've ruined with that. There's that influence forever. I think if we do drop the ball and mishandle something in our human weakness or emotion, we need to be just as cautious with going back and doing damage control. That was a hurtful situation, but I said some things I shouldn't have said. I mishandled this. You know, we have worked through this and I love this person and they are my brother, sister in Christ. The follow-up needs to happen.
Yeah.
And if I had known, I definitely would have done that, but I didn't even know. I didn't even know that that had lodged itself in his heart for all those years, and huge regret there.
Yeah. There's that unintentional, and you just don't know. So excellent point. So as in parenting, another way of thinking about, or another area of thinking about unintentional influence is how they see our dedication to certain things. Obviously we want to be dedicated to the Lord, but be dedicated to the local church, be dedicated to our daily study, things like that, that we of course want them to see, but are they also seeing dedication to maybe their education? And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be dedicated to our kids' education, but do they see that we're placing more emphasis on their grades or their participation in something extracurricular, or making sure that they're at the top of their class, or there's so many things have changed with different homeschooling and co-ops and things like that, and I don't know the best way to analogize that, but are we placing so much attention on other things unintentionally because we want them to excel at life. We want them to do their best at whatever they're setting their hand to, but what do they see in us? Are we so dedicated to that to the exclusion of things that really are more important? So I think we have to be careful with our influence there.
Mm-hmm.
So parenting, that would be one of the major areas that I think we have to be careful of our unintentional influence. Another area is friends. It's such a simple thing, but I started thinking about inclusion and exclusion with friends. And that made me think about Barnabas and how in Acts 9, how remember how Saul, they were all afraid of him. And understandably so. But Barnabas, the words that it says that he took hold of Saul and he brought him to them. And then he told them all about the wonderful things that Paul had been doing and why they shouldn't be afraid of him. So he was very involved and I think that was probably intentional on his part, but I don't know. It could be that was just the way he was, and that he saw the good in people and he wanted to make sure everybody else saw the good in people. So how are we unintentionally, by including or excluding someone, what are we communicating to someone?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's certain people we'd rather be around, let's just be real. I'd
Yeah.
rather I'd rather hang out with you than some other people. But there are certain times, there are times set aside for that. And then there are other times that we really, whether we're at worship or after worship when we go talk, and we tend to want to go be with our people. But
Mm-hmm.
what do? Do we go include other people? Can you think of other maybe friend areas that we unintentionally influence and put you on the
Yeah, our
spot?
feelings towards certain individuals can influence others before they even have a chance to get to know them for themselves. Because if we've had some sort of interaction that left an impression on us, and we say just enough
Yeah.
to
Or
not be
give a
guilty of
look.
gossip, but to leave some hints. you
Hmm.
know, you know what I mean? And so we're influencing how they feel towards somebody else and based on our experiences with them. And that's never okay.
Yeah, I was thinking about first impressions too, how let people make their own first impressions. You don't need to form them for them.
Mhm. Mhm.
Or, it doesn't even have to be a first impression, but that are I think that there have been times in my past friendships that they were friends with someone else that I didn't really get along, and not that I didn't get along with them, but I didn't have a good, how am I saying this? I
You didn't
just,
cook with them.
yeah, I didn't click with them exactly. But my good friend did. So I thought, what am I missing here? Or why would they want to go be with them instead of with me? There's all those
Yeah.
feelings that we have. And what do we do with that? Do we do we say things like, okay, whatever? Or maybe we're having a dinner party or something like that, and we include our good friends, but not their good friends.
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm just trying to think of different ways that as friends we unintentionally influence. And I think that there are probably lots of different ways, and we just have to be more careful and be more aware of how we influence. There's gossip, of course, there's gossip. And we are helping other people form impressions of people without maybe even thinking about how it's going to affect them. Maybe it's something that we know that they don't need to know, and we tell them, and now they know that, and so we've lost our own uh they know that they can't trust us with the confidence anymore because so and so knows now. Just stuff like that.
Yeah, we could almost respond, good grief. Are you saying that we have to be careful in every single thing we say and do in every single situation we're in? Yes. And we're not saying that. God's word says that, and it's not this ultra unreachable, unattainable, high standard of moral excellence, or is it? It's this is what we're trying to be Christ-like in our dealings with other people, in our speech, in our attitude, in our actions and behavior. And as imperfect humans who sin, we're going to drop the ball. Of course we are. Of course we're going to mishandle and we're going to influence in a way we never wanted to or meant to or intended to. It's going to happen. But what's the overall picture, and inconsistency? Do I continually leave a bad impression about other people when I'm talking? Do I continually complain about my lot in life and my responsibilities and my schedule? Do I continue, what's the overall impression that I'm leaving with people? Because even when I look back through the years and I've got these mentors that I'm so thankful for that did influence me, it's not because they were perfect. And I'm well aware of that fact. And I've seen them in their not perfect days. But the overall impression of their life and influence and example on me was a very good one.
Yeah. And I think too, like you said, are we saying that every word we have to be careful all the time? And and you said yes, and I completely agree. And I think that as we mature in Christ, as we are working to transform our minds,
Mhm.
as we are growing and working on our spiritual selves, then that becomes natural. It's not something that we necessarily have to, okay, say the right thing, say the right thing, do the right thing, do the right thing. It comes naturally because our minds have been transformed and we are conforming our will to the will of God. And I don't think we'll ever get to a point where we don't have to be careful and, because it's just going to flow perfectly off of our lips and we're going to say every right thing possible. But I've seen it in my life, and I promise I'm not saying that in a proud way. I've seen it in other lives where as you grow, the desire to honor people and to lift people up and to think the best about people and to have that agape love toward people, it becomes who you are rather than who you're trying to be. And I think it's a constant journey. It's always something we can do better in, but it becomes less of an unintentional thing,
Mhm.
and it becomes less of an intentional things and becomes more of just who you are, part of your character. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So married or parenting, friends, and then the world. How do we unintentionally influence the world? This will be the last thing. What vibe or aura are we giving off about Christianity?
Mhm.
And of course, we want to present, this wonderful front of how wonderful it is to be a Christian, and it is. But do we unintentionally say something else by the way that we live, the way that we talk, the way that we present ourselves on social media? And I was just thinking about one thing came to mind. And I know I've mentioned this before, but it was such a huge thing for me when we were at West Palm Beach in Florida one time, probably 10 plus years ago. And we happened to be at the church building like on a Monday morning, and very few people were there, but Dan Jenkins preached there. I think David Sproul does now, but Dan does also, or did. I can't remember exactly what's the situation with him now, but he was a preacher there at the time. And some kids came in from the neighborhood, came into the foyer with their skateboards or some kind of board. Maybe it was a hoverboard or whatever, I don't know.
Mhm.
And they asked Dan if they could ride down the aisles because it was a little bit of a slope, and apparently they knew that it was a great place to ride. And he said, "Sure you can." And I remember being shocked because kids in the church building riding something, all the possibilities of what possibly could go wrong, that they'd mess it up, they'd have an accident, they would run into something, they would hurt the building, they would hurt themselves. But he said, "Sure, y'all come on in here, make yourselves at home, and I'll be right here." And it made just, it lifted my heart. It made me feel like, I mean, because he said, "Well, we want to have an impact on the kids in this neighborhood, and what better way of doing it than welcoming them into this church building and
And they
making
never
them
heard
feel at
that.
home."
Mhm.
And I just thought it was the neatest thing because I had never seen, I say that, I can't say that. I'd never seen that kind of attitude before, but it was rare,
Mhm.
because of what might happen, or maybe the liability or all the other stuff. But he said, "Sure." And that has had such an impact on my heart,
Mhm.
to be someone that comes from a place of yes rather than coming from a place of no, an automatic no, we can't do that. No, you shouldn't do that. That's not a wise thing to do. And maybe they might have hurt themselves. Maybe they might have run into something, but they also knew that they were welcome in the church building
Mhm.
where Dan Jenkins preached and taught them truth. And that just has made a huge impression on me. And then on the negative side, another thing that had a huge impression on me was when one of my babies was little. I don't remember which one it was. I want to say it was probably Jordan. So 35 years ago, we were at a lectureship and he was fussy. And so I was walking him around, and I happened to walk into the book room, the display room, and there was a group of 5 or 6 men huddled in there, older men, and they were just ripping somebody apart with their words.
Oh, wow.
They were gossiping, they were being hurtful in their words. They didn't know who I was, but I knew who they were. And they, I guess, didn't care what I was hearing, but it left such a bad taste in my mouth, and it made me think less of them. It made me feel sorry for the person they were talking about. It
Mhm.
made me think to myself, why are they in here talking about someone rather than in there listening to a lesson? All of these thoughts went through my mind. But that taught me someone's always listening, someone's always hearing, and you're influencing for good or bad. And that was definitely bad. I've just never forgotten it. I have forgotten who they were. I'm glad about that because I don't want to remember that. I do remember the valuable lesson that I shouldn't do that. So what are we communicating to someone that's in the world? You probably, I can see the kind of person you are. You probably wouldn't be interested in Christianity. Is that
Mm.
something we communicate? Do we communicate that we are an exclusive group here of Christians, and unless you look like we look or dress like we dress, you probably wouldn't fit in here? Or maybe it's one of those, you can't do that and be a Christian. Or maybe they're just seeing us fight each other all the time.
Mhm.
So all of that has an influence on the world. I talk too much.
No, I think this one is huge, and how we represent Christ in our own personal lives, but how our view toward our own church family. The things that we say and post. about the bride of Christ has a huge impact. And I just think we need to use such wisdom and be careful. And, of course, the church is made up of flawed humans who are going to let you down and make mistakes. But be careful about your attitude. Be careful about any bitterness that you might be sharing with the world. And because it's the bride of Christ and he died for her and he holds her up in glory and honor, and we're to do that too. And I think in every other arena of life, when we get our feelings hurt or we're disappointed by somebody, we take it as a matter of course, But if it happens in the church, we're all of a sudden all indignant, and how dare they? This is so not right. And while that's true, that it's not right. We have so much in God's word about addressed to Christians about how we're supposed to treat each other, to bear with one another and to forgive one another. So it shouldn't catch us off guard. We shouldn't be surprised. God knew that his kingdom was going to be made up of flawed individuals who were going to hurt each other and let each other down. And even told us that. And that's why so much of the New Testament letters and what it looks like to live in his kingdom addresses how we treat one another, and the patience and grace and the things that we extend to each other. So I think, if we're going to influence, that's how we need to be influencing others is our grace toward one another when we're disappointed or somebody says something unexpected or thoughtless, and the compassion and love and honor that we show anyway. That's what they should be seeing in the world about the Lord's church.
What is it, John 13:34 that says, the new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I've loved you. I can only sing it in my mind, but he says, by this shall all men know that you're my disciples, if you have love for one another.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I mean, what are people learning about us? Do they see that we love one another, or do they see that we are fighting with one another, that we're mad at one another, that we see, there's these levels, and which level are they on? It's just so many yucky things about what we present to the world through our social media, through our attitude, our faces, and we don't intend to, but we do.
Mhm.
So instead of all of those things, maybe we should remember to put forth, to be intentional about this, to be intentional until it becomes part of who we are. Let me show you who Jesus is by the way that I live. Maybe we just need to be more welcoming. And there's always room for that, to be more welcoming, whoever they are, whatever they look like, however they're dressed, to welcome them into our fellowship and to show them who Jesus is and teach them how their life can be better. I think so much we might say you can't do that and be a Christian, but what we really mean is, and what we really need to impress upon them is that God only wants our peace, and let me show you how you can have that
Mhm.
and how you can avoid this by, staying away from that, just stuff like that. So those were just some thoughts that I had about, especially about unintentional influence and how we need to make it part of who we are, a good thing.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Good
That's it.
conversation.
Yeah. So do you have something good or some good gossip?
Well, I wanted to share with you about this couple that we met in Anchorage, Alaska. Neil had a long conversation with them. Their last names were Hogan, the Hogans. And I'll have to get more specifics later, but they had spent decades of their life in the northern part of Alaska and working with very small communities that only they were teaching there and that were only they would receive shipments by ship one time a year,
Ooh.
all the supplies and things that they needed for living and teaching and things like that. And dedicated so much of their life to that and said it was like the best years of their life. And they're well advanced in years. I'm not sure exactly how advanced, but they were well advanced in years. And just now, I think within the last year, moved down to Anchorage just to be closer to doctors and things like that. But I was thinking about I heard that when they moved up there, they had a toddler and a 10-day-old baby.
Wow. Ooh, in Alaska,
And yes, and they
northern
moved up
Alaska.
there to commit their lives to this community and being helpful and teaching. And it was just amazing. I mean, there were so many things that Neil was sharing with me that he learned from their conversation that I kept thinking they need to write a book. I mean, it was amazing, and just that spirit that's not afraid to go anywhere or do anything to help others. It was just remarkable.
Oh, that's awesome. Like
Hmm.
well advanced, like in their 70s, 80s, or
Yes.
so it
Yeah.
would have been
70s. Yeah.
like 50 years ago when they would have been young. And that would be daunting because, you think about not having any internet to be able to communicate with people. You'd be counting on letters and
Exactly. Yeah.
low, probably much slower than what we're used to too.
Hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'll
Hmm.
be interested in hearing more about them. So I don't have any good gossip, but I have something good for you.
What you got?
It is a lemon squeezer, but
Oh,
it lays flat. Do you have one of these?
no, I've seen those. I've seen those. Yeah.
So at first, when I was like, how does that work? I thought it just squeezed between here, you
Mhm.
know, but it opens up. And so you put the lemon in there and then, s- so you put it in there, like in here, and then squeeze, and all the juice comes out here. And I think I just like it better because it lays flat. And I have so many things in my drawer that are constantly try to open the drawer and nope, not today. Not going to open that drawer today.
The potato masher. We're looking at
Yes.
potato masher.
I need to put hinges on that where it'll lay flat.
Yeah.
Maybe I should develop that, invent it.
Yeah.
So you have some good gossip and I have something good for you.
And you know what? I want to mention one more thing about our topic, and
Okay.
that is to be intentional about thanking the people that have influenced you.
Oh, what a great point.
Neil brought that up this morning because he was talking about Brother David Sane, who we just learned had just passed away. And while he was getting ready for work, he started thinking back to all the ways that he has mentored him and influenced him through the years. And even a year ago, David Sane had emailed him with just some encouraging things about ministry and, just like how he always did. He always reached out and encouraged people. And he said that he'll never know. I should have told him. I should have thanked him for the decades of encouragement and influence that he's had on me, and I didn't. And so I was thinking about that. Again, it's that whole reset. We grieve in the loss, but take advantage of the reset and the reminders. And one of them is to thank those people that you can think about through the years have had such a good influence on your life while you
That
can.
would be a great call to action from this episode to find people that have influenced you and tell them. I thought about that too at the funeral, that how much Alice would have loved to see all of her grands together and all of the people. She was a very humble person, but I don't know that she realized the scope of her influence. And it's comforting to the family to hear it, but would have been great for her to know it as well. So let
Yeah.
people know before it's too late how they've influenced you in a good way. Not in a bad way. If they've influenced you badly, you don't really need to do that.
Let it go.
All right. Been a good discussion. I'm glad to see your face again.
Yours too.
Until next time.
Keep looking up.
Love ya.
You too, friend. Bye.